There are just three airlines that control over 50% of the US domestic market, and they've been around since the early 1900s.
United States airlines like American, Delta, and United have always chased the best. So when Boeing introduced the 777X, it seemed like the perfect match, an aircraft built for the future. But then, everything changed. Delays dragged on, technical issues piled up, and now, years later, not a single U.S. airline has the 777X in its fleet. But that doesn't mean they've been silent. In fact, all three airlines just made huge announcements regarding their plans for this plan.
Boeing's making steady progress towards certifying its 777X, with recent crosswind testing at Lubbock Airport, LBB, marking a big step forward.
What did they say? And what does it mean for the next era of American air travel? Stick around, because you'll want to hear this. Boeing 777X's technical innovations and issues despite incredible design features. When Boeing announced the 777X in 2013, it sounded like the beginning of a new era in long-distance flying. Airlines were excited, engineers were proud, and passengers were hopeful. Boeing had taken one of the world's most trusted wide-body jets, the 777, and promised to make it even better. The 777X was going to be the plane that would dominate long-haul flights for the next generation. It would be faster, cheaper to fly, better for the environment, and more comfortable for passengers. The plan was to have the plane flying by 2020, but fast forward to today, 2025, and the 777X still hasn't carried a single paying passenger, as its new target delivery date has been fixed for 2026. So what happened? Well, to understand that, we need to first take a look at Boeing's design approach for the 77X. Instead of building a new aircraft from scratch, Boeing decided to stick with what had worked before. They took the older 777, which was first released in 1995, and gave it a massive upgrade. They added all the best parts of their other new plane, the 787 Dreamliner. That meant using composite materials for strength and lightness, giving the aircraft larger carbon fiber wings, adding modern cockpit technology, and improving aerodynamics to reduce drag. From the outside, it sounded like a smart and cost-effective decision. Why build an entirely new plane when you can take something proven and make it even better? But this kind of half-new, half-old design, which is typically called a derivative aircraft, is a risky move. Boeing had done something similar with the 737 MAX, and that didn't go well either. In that case, trying to stretch an old airframe to fit new tech led to serious safety flaws. With the 777X, it wasn't safety issues at first, but rather an avalanche of engineering, production, and testing problems that began to pile up. Let's talk about the technical innovations first, because honestly, the 777X really is an impressive piece of engineering on paper. One of its most striking features is its foldable wingtips. The new wings are much longer than the ones on the previous 777, stretching to 235 feet to help improve fuel efficiency by making the plane glide through the air more smoothly. But a longer wingspan also means it wouldn't fit at most airport gates. So Boeing came up with an idea never seen on a commercial jet before. This idea was to make the wingtips fold upward while on the ground. When the plane is flying, the tips are extended. When it lands, they fold up. This brilliant compromise allowed the plane to have longer wings without needing airports to build new gates. Then there are the engines, being the mighty GE9X built by General Electric. These are the largest jet engines ever made, with a fan diameter wider than the fuselage of a Boeing 737. They were designed to be quieter, cleaner, and much more efficient than previous models. Each engine can produce over 100,000 pounds of thrust, but with lower fuel burn. Combined with the plane's sleeker wings, the 777X promised to use 20% less fuel per seat than the older 777-300ER. That's a huge deal for airlines, because fuel is one of their biggest costs. That's not all. The passenger cabin also got a big upgrade. The 777X would have wider cabins, better air pressure, higher humidity, and larger windows, which is similar to what travelers love about the Dreamliner. These features reduce jet lag and make flying feel less like a metal tube in the sky and more like a comfortable room. Airlines could even keep the same 10 seats per row setup, but still offer passengers more space. But building something this great isn't just about dreams, it's about execution. And that's where Boeing hit the wall. From the beginning, Boeing ran into problems. One big issue was its attempt to use automated robots to assemble parts of the 777X fuselage. The plan was to make the assembly faster and more precise, but it didn't work out. The robots kept failing, misaligning parts, and causing more trouble than they solved. Eventually, Boeing gave up on them and went back to manual assembly, which meant more delays. Then, there were delays at the new composite wing factory in Everett, Washington, where they were struggling to get the new production lines working at full speed. This added months, even years, to the timeline. And then came the engine problems. While the GE9X engines were groundbreaking, they weren't flawless. During testing, they faced performance shortfalls, and even a high-profile failure where an engine was damaged in transit. That led to major testing delays. GE had to go back and fix several issues before the engines could be certified. And if the engine isn't ready, the plane can't fly. Things got even worse last year, in mid-2024, when Boeing was forced to pause flight testing after finding a structural issue with the part that mounts the engine to the aircraft. A loose or faulty engine mount is a huge safety risk, because if it fails mid-air, the engine could detach, something that actually happened in the tragic American Airlines Flight 191 crash back in 1979. Boeing found similar issues on 2 other test planes, which shook confidence in the project. As a result, they once again delayed the launch, this time pushing the first delivery to 2026. And all of this was happening while the company was also dealing with a machinist strike that slowed production even further. So, while the design was excellent and full of promise, the process of building the plane turned into a nightmare. It became more and more obvious that Boeing had taken on a project that looked great in theory, but wasn't quite working in reality, at least not yet. Customers were not happy. Emirates, which had ordered over 200 units of the 777X, openly criticized Boeing. They said the delays were costing them money and forcing them to rely on older aircraft longer than planned. Some other airlines canceled or deferred orders, but strangely enough, none of these orders came from 3 of the biggest U.S. airlines, namely American Airlines, Delta Airlines, and United Airlines. Keep watching to learn why. Lack of interest in the Boeing 777X from American Airlines, Delta Airlines, and United Airlines. The Boeing 777X project was meant to be a crown jewel in the company's line of long-haul aircraft. Big international carriers like Emirates, Lufthansa, and Qatar Airways quickly placed large orders as soon as it launched. But in the United States, something strange happened. None of the big 3 airlines, Delta, United, or American, rushed to place an order. In fact, as of 2025, not one of them has bought a single 777X. And that silence says a lot. To understand why, we have to talk about how American airlines work. Unlike carriers in the Middle East or Europe, U.S. airlines operate with something called a multi-hub strategy. That means instead of having one massive airport as their base, like Emirates has in Dubai or British Airways has in London, they spread their flights out across several cities. Delta, for example, uses Atlanta, Detroit, Minneapolis, and Salt Lake City as hubs. United has hubs in Chicago, Denver, Houston, and Newark. American is based in Dallas or Fort Worth, Charlotte, and Miami, among others. Because the United States is so large and spread out, no one airport dominates in the same way as Dubai or Frankfurt. This setup changes everything. When you don't have one big hub, it becomes harder to fill very large airplanes. The Boeing 777X can carry around 400 passengers in a typical three-class layout. That's a lot of seats to sell, especially on long international routes. In the US, even on popular coast-to-coast flights like New York to Los Angeles, airlines often prefer using smaller planes with more frequent departures. That's because American passengers like flexibility. Instead of waiting for one big flight each day, they want a choice of many flight times. A giant plane, like the 777X, doesn't fit easily into that model. Another problem is seasonality. Travel demand in the US rises and falls with the seasons. During summer and holiday periods, more people fly. But in off-peak months like January or September, even large airlines struggle to fill big planes. If you have a 400-seat aircraft but only 280 people show up, you're flying a lot of empty seats. That's not good for business. It's no wonder that many American airlines prefer slightly smaller long-range aircraft, like the Airbus A350-900 or Boeing 787 Dreamliner, which carry fewer people but still go the distance. Speaking of the Dreamliner, it's become a favorite for many U.S. carriers. Delta has ordered both the A350 and 787 in recent years. United has leaned heavily into the 787 fleet, using it on routes to Asia and Europe. American Airlines, meanwhile, has focused more on the 787-9 and 787-8 versions, which seat fewer people and work better on their mixed-route network. These choices all point to the same idea: flexibility over size. Things don't end there. Another reason for the U.S. airlines' disinterest in this plane is geography. The United States, as big as it is, doesn't sit in the middle of any major global transit path. If you look at a world map, you'll see that hubs like Doha, Dubai, and Istanbul are located in perfect positions to connect flights between Asia, Europe, and Africa. That's why airlines based there use giant planes like the A380 and plan to use the 777X, but the US is different. Most passengers flying to America are ending their journey there. The country doesn't act as a connecting point in the same way, so it doesn't need as many supersized jets. Another big factor is airport infrastructure and immigration rules. In the US, there is no such thing as sterile international transit. That means every passenger landing in the US, even if they're just switching planes, has to go through customs and immigration. This adds time, costs, and complications. In Europe or Asia, passengers can stay within international zones at airports, making quick transfers between long-haul flights. But in the US, this is simply not possible, so American airports don't function well as international transit hubs. This makes the idea of funneling thousands of people through one big aircraft less practical. Let's not forget that big delays also cost money. Airlines plan their fleets years in advance. If you were expecting a new aircraft in 2021, but now it's coming in 2026, that messes up your entire schedule. That's why some airlines like Emirates have demanded compensation from Boeing for the long wait. American carriers, already cautious, would rather wait things out than gamble on another uncertain aircraft timeline. In the meantime, Airbus has taken full advantage of this hesitation. Their A350-1000 offers similar performance to the 777X, but is already flying with many airlines. Delta, for instance, has ordered 20 A350-1000s, filling the same role the 777X might have played. The A350 is also available in different sizes, giving airlines more choices. This fleet flexibility has helped Airbus become more attractive to U.S. carriers, who don't want to commit to one giant airplane for limited use cases. That said, the story of the 777X in America isn't completely over. There's one place it still might shine: cargo. Stay tuned to see how exactly this will play out. The future of the Boeing 777X with U.S. Airlines. Right now, the most likely first American customers of the Boeing 777X are not the usual suspects like United, Delta, or American Airlines.
U.S. aircraft maker Boeing has officially announced the start of production for its new passenger plane, the 777X.
Instead, it's the cargo giants, being FedEx and UPS, that may end up flying the plane first. These companies move goods, not people, and they operate a very different kind of business. Unlike passenger airlines, which deal with busy seasons, off-peak months, booking apps, and passenger preferences, cargo airlines care mostly about one thing: efficiency. They want to fly as much cargo as possible, as far as possible, while spending the least money on fuel and maintenance. And on paper, the 777X is perfect for that. The freighter version of the 777X, also called the 7778F, has already been generating attention. Boeing officially launched this version in January 2022, and it's expected to begin deliveries in the late 2027 to early 2028 range. While this model still needs to go through its own flight testing and certification process, it doesn't face the same level of scrutiny as the passenger version. That's partly because cargo aircraft don't carry people, and partly because Boeing can apply lessons from its earlier 77X testing to speed things up. It also helps that the original 777F, the freighter version of the previous 777, is already one of the most trusted cargo planes in the world. For companies like UPS and FedEx, a bigger, newer version with lower operating costs is an easy sell. FedEx especially could benefit. Their existing 777F fleet allows them to connect the US to faraway markets like China, India, and Europe. But as e-commerce keeps growing and global shipping demand rises, they'll need more capacity and better fuel savings. If the 7778F delivers on its promise of 25% better fuel efficiency compared to older freighters, it would be a smart investment. UPS, with its large presence in Louisville, Kentucky, is also likely to take interest, especially as it expands services to Europe and Asia. Cargo may not be glamorous, but it's a quiet, consistent engine for the aviation world. And in that space, the 777X may find a strong and steady home before passengers ever step on board. Now, what about the passenger version? Will the 777X ever fly with American, United, or Delta? The short answer is yes, probably. But the long answer is not anytime soon. Let's take a look at each airline one by one. United Airlines is the most likely candidate to eventually adopt the 777X for passengers. Right now, United already operates a large fleet of 777-300 ERs, which the 777X is meant to replace. Some of these planes are getting older and will need to be retired by the early 2030s. But United also has a massive fleet of 787 Dreamliners, which cover many of the same routes the 777X would fly. The big challenge for United is that they may not need a larger plane just yet. Their focus is on adding new international routes, yes, but many of those can be served with the 7879 or 787-10. Still, as travel demand grows, especially between the US and Asia or the Middle East, United may eventually turn to the 777X. If it happens, it will likely be after 2028, once the aircraft is fully certified, tested, and proven in real-world use. American Airlines, on the other hand, has been more cautious. They already passed on the 777X once. Back in 2018, American Airlines chose not to buy the 77X or even the 787-10. Instead, they focused on the 7879, which is smaller and better suited for their current long-haul routes. Like United, American has no real reason to jump into a larger plane right now. Many of their international flights are to Europe, South America, and some parts of Asia, which can be served by medium to large aircraft without the need for 400-seat giants. But by 2030, some of their older 777-2000s will be due for replacement. That might be the moment American reconsiders the 777X, especially if fuel prices rise or long-distance travel becomes more concentrated again. Then there's Delta Airlines, which has historically leaned toward Airbus. Delta has made big bets on the A350-900 and even ordered A350-1000s, a direct competitor to the 777X. Their decision likely shows two things. First, Delta prefers to operate aircraft that are already flying and proven. And second, Airbus offers a variety of plane sizes in the same family, giving Delta more flexibility in planning routes. While it's not impossible that Delta might one day consider the 777X, it's far less likely unless Airbus can't meet their needs in the future. For now, Delta seems happy with its current fleet mix and isn't likely to change direction. So what does this mean for the future? Well, if things go smoothly for Boeing from 2026 to 2028, and if the 779 performs well across the Atlantic and Pacific, then we may see the first U.S. passenger orders shortly after that. These orders would likely be for replacement, not expansion, meant to swap out older 777s and 747s that are reaching the end of their lives. In the end, the Boeing 777X still has a future in the U.S., just not the one that was imagined a decade ago. It may not arrive in time for the 2026 travel season, and it may not launch with fireworks and headlines. But it will get there, whether it rolls onto the tarmac under a FedEx logo or lands in New York with United's colors. It's only a matter of time before this advanced aircraft finds its place in the American sky. Well, what do you think about the U.S. Airlines' decision to not order the Boeing 777X? Let us know in the comment section. Remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Also, click the following video shown on your screen. You will enjoy it.